Hey, everybody. Oh, I felt like it was really dark for a minute, but it's better now. Okay, so this is one of two sessions we have left. And yes, I mentioned last week that we are not going to be testing this material, but it's still good material for you to know. I have received back about half of ARC's exams. So if you have not finished those yet, you should. And you should send them back in some way, shape, or form so that I can grade them and be done with them. Because I just want to be done grading things. So, and that way you know that you passed and get to move on. So today, like I mentioned, we have another, sort of shortish story. It's an entire chapter out of the Bible in Daniel. And it's a story that you're probably familiar with. We're going to be talking about Daniel in the Lion's Den. So you're going to need this worksheet. You don't have to color it, but I like mine pretty, And so it just splits into 5 little flaps. So as I read, if you haven't put this in, that might be something you want to do so that you can write under them right away. And then you just glue, under kind of where Daniel's standing here. So that's the one worksheet that you have to go with this today. Like I said, today's a little bit shorter of a story in that it's only just this chapter about Daniel and that story of Daniel in the Lion's Den. And then next week is a little bit longer with Esther, but it's a really cool story. So you'll want to come back and check that out too. So like I said, we're not being tested on this, but if you haven't finished your exam or your test yet, finish it and send it to me. That is key and crucial. Okay, so without further ado, because I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet because it's a beautiful day outside and we all want to enjoy the weather, let's just get rolling. And so I'm going to read from Daniel chapter 6, and I'll stop and explain anything that he's explaining as we go, and then we'll fill in those 5 flaps and call it a day. So, Daniel chapter 6. It pleased Darius. Oh, okay, yeah. So I'm going to stop right here. Last week we had King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar has just been killed off right before this. So now we have King Darius. He's our king this time. So it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel, unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." So basically, Darius becomes king, and he sets 3 head honcho guys, Daniel being one of them. And a lot of the guys who are underneath Daniel's rank aren't too happy about that, but they can't find a reason for him not to be high above them. So they're going to try to connect a way of Daniel being faithful to God as a way for them to kind of get him kicked out of his spot. So it says, "Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, 'O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors, are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction, that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked.' Therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction." So they come up with this grand plan of, okay, King Darius, for the next 30 days, everybody can only pray and worship you, the king, and nothing else. So just sign right here on the line, and that's going to take care of that. And the king thinks, fine, everybody gets to worship me. That's awesome. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, "O king, Did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, The thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. So Daniel, because he's faithful to God, ignores this rule that he can only bow down to the king and continues to pray to God 3 times a day. And these higher up men catch him doing that, and they kind of report him to the king and say, Hey, king, Daniel's not following your rules. And the king says, Of course, that's exactly what I said. So he said, Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing must be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. So when the king finds out that Daniel wasn't following this rule, and the king really likes Daniel, he was upset that, he had to essentially throw Daniel in the lion's den. And he's trying to find a way out of it, but those other higher up guys are like, King, remember, according to our land's rules, a king can't change his mind on the rule he makes. So the king has no choice but to throw Daniel in the lion's den, because otherwise he'd be breaking his own rules. And obviously people wouldn't have a lot of respect for a king who did that. And throws him into the den of lions, but says, Oh, Daniel, I really hope your God protects you. So now we find out what happened. Then at the break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm. Then the king was exceedingly glad, and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. So the king goes out in the morning, calls out to Daniel and says, Did your God rescue you? Are you okay? And Daniel calls back, Long live the king. I'm fine. I prayed, and God sent an angel to protect me and shut the lions' mouths. And so they pull Daniel out of the pit, and they see he's totally fine. No scratches, no harm done. And the king, in turn, takes those men who had plotted to have Daniel thrown in, throws them and their families and their children into the pit instead, and the lions eat them up right away. So punishment on those guys. Then the last little bit of our story says, Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to tremble in fear before the God of Daniel. For he is a living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered, this during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. And so just kind of like last week with the fiery furnace, we see that once again, King Darius puts it into place that everyone should worship this God that Daniel worships, the true God, because he has the power to save from anything. And so we see again a turning back to praising the right one true God. So that is reading for our story. So hopefully by now, if you've either had a chance or you're ahead of me and have glued this in, but we're going to go over what the flaps, the fill in the blank flaps are. So the first top one says, King Darius made Daniel. And we know, back at the beginning of our story, that he made Daniel one of the top rulers in the kingdom. So I'll turn that here. Oh. Made them one of the top rulers in the kingdom. I hope you can see that okay. I'll say it once more, so that way if you can't, you can at least hear it and you can go back and watch it again later. One of the top rulers in the kingdom. So that's our first flap. Next, as we fill in our summary of our story, it says, because Daniel worked so hard, King Darius planned to, and we know here, put Daniel in charge of all the other rulers in the kingdom. You know, he was putting Daniel really high up. So, put Daniel in charge of all the other rulers in the kingdom. And once more, that one is put Daniel in charge of all the other rulers in the kingdom. Okay. Our third box says the other rulers tricked King Darius into making a new law that said, here's what we know the law said. For the next 30 days, everyone in the kingdom must pray to King Darius. Turn that one. For the next 30 days, everyone in the kingdom must pray to King Darius. And once more, I'll read it. For the next 30 days, everyone in the kingdom must pray to King Darius. All right, so we got the top 3 flaps done. We're going to do the fourth one now. Daniel heard about the new law, but continued to, let me flip it over, worship and pray to the true God. That's a short and sweet one. Can you see it okay? Worship and pray to the true God. So it's worship and pray to the true God. So, lastly, Daniel gets in his trouble. Our last flap says, Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, but God sent an angel to shut the lions' mouths. Okay. Sent an angel to shut the lions' mouths. And so once again, I'll read it. Sent an angel to shut the lions' mouths. And that's the end of our story and our time today. And so next week we'll have Esther. And Esther, we're going to have a couple different things. We have both. You can have your little drawing of Esther, which she's got 4 little flaps that we'll fill in here. I haven't even filled mine in yet. And then we'll also have this one about the different men in her life, because there's a lot of characters that go on in that story. So if you want to have those prepped ahead of time, you're more than welcome. But there is going to be a lot of reading that I have to do next week to go with it, as you can see listed on the sheet. So, yeah, you'll have time to work on it then too. But it's kind of a complicated story, but it's a fun story, and it's one that not a lot of people hear all the time. So it'll be a fun one for you guys to check out. So that's that. If you didn't already, I can tell that there are people watching me, but I don't know who you people are that are watching me. If you have not sent back or completed your exam yet, or talked to your parents about giving you those questions that I emailed them, make sure you do that and send it back so that I can get it all taken care of and that you have all your requirements done. And like I said, I have about half of yours right now, so that's good, but I want the other half. And let's try to have them by next week, since that's our last class. So don't try, just have them done by next week. because no one wants to be like, I don't think you guys are going to have to retake your test, but no one wants to have to retake a test after we're not really having class anymore. That's no fun. So those of you who already sent them to me, I'll be working on them probably tomorrow and email your parents and let you know how you did. And if you haven't sent them to me, you should, so that I can also let you guys know. So that's that. Next week we're doing Esther, and that'll be our last week. So enjoy and go out and enjoy the beautiful weather and have fun.